An author stumbles across a treasure trove of queer history. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to another review video in the series of reviews I'm doing about books that were nominated for this year's First Book Polari Prize. You may know the Polari Prize seeks to award and draw recognition to books written by LGBTQ+ authors. There was some controversy with that this year, which led to them deciding not to award any of the prizes. I'll describe more about the controversy in the show notes down below. But one of the things that I was motivated to do was then to review all of these books and at least be one person out there talking about these books who should have got a lot more attention than they're going to get because the prize has been shut down. The book this time is the first work of nonfiction from the Polari Prize, First Book Prize, that I've read, and that's the Diaries of Mr. Lucas, Life in 1960s Gay London by Hugo Greenlagh. This book was one which automatically appealed to me as a historian. Greenlaw is kind of an amateur historian. He kind of focuses on what is a remarkable source of information about the life of gay and bisexual men in London and the surrounds of London in the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s. So what happened was that Mr. Greenlaw just happened to be working for a documentary film crew who had put out word, for people who are interested in sharing their stories about, the life of gay people in London in the 60s and 70s. And Mr. Lucas, who, in 2008, 9, whenever Hugo Greenlaw first met him, responded and said he wanted to be interviewed. Greenlaw went to his house. He meets the very elderly now Mr. Lucas and learns from Mr. Lucas that he has kept a daily diary of his life since at least the 1950s. And so that his home, Mr. Lucas's home, is filled with literally a notebook which serves as a diary for every year of his life. And Greenlaw thinks what an absolute treasure these diaries are. He wants to be able to read them. He wants to be able to see them. He becomes friends with Mr. Lucas. And when Mr. Lucas dies, he essentially leaves the diaries to Hugo Greenlaw because of a dispute with the will. Not all the diaries were recovered. Some were destroyed and thrown away. But Greenlaw gets his hands on most of them. Particularly, he gets his hands on most of the diaries involving Mr. Lucas's life as a single man, I believe, in his 30s, a single gay man in his 30s in the 1960s, and how precarious that situation was, how difficult his love life was, how difficult it was for him to form lasting relationships that would kind of satisfy his romantic heart, and how later on he turned to essentially hiring male prostitutes to satisfy his sexual desires. And the book doesn't shy away from any of the aspects of that which might give you pause or which might be concerning to you. It discusses them all, and it oftentimes uses Mr. Lucas's own words to kind of tell the story, as the subtitle suggests, of life in gay London during the 1960s. So as I've been doing with all these books, I would make notes about the book as I went through. I think maybe because this is a work of nonfiction and a work of history, that's what I write. That's one of my real areas of interest. I've made a lot of notes, but I'm just going to go ahead and read these to you. Remember, these are notes that I take as I read the book with my impressions of the book, so sometimes they change by the end. So here we go. Very interesting approach to telling the history of gay London in and around the 1960s are the diaries of one pretty average gay man. The author's very harsh his depiction of Mr. Lucas as an old man. It's a vivid and almost cruel description of the man, his clothes, his stench, the squalor in which he lives. Maybe this is done to make sure the reader doesn't think this will be an overly sympathetic portrayal. If so, it works maybe too well. I like the form Greenlaw sets the scene of like the overall history of what's going on in the time period, and then uses Lucas's diaries for source material, but also for detail and nuance. He has to be careful not to steal the impact of Lucas's own words in his lead-ins, though, and occasionally he over-explains what Lucas is going to say instead of letting the reader come to the same point through the diary entries themselves. Midway through the book, Greenlagh, his story and adventures begin to intrude in the story. The chapter about Dublin, for example, if Lucas made 8 trips to Dublin in the 1960s, yet Greenlagh has to flesh out these trips by going to Dublin himself in search of Mr. Lucas's Dublin. It further gives an impression that while Mr. Lucas' diaries are voluminous, there isn't a great deal of interest in them, which is sad and makes the premise of the book seem a little bit oversold. However, what Greenlagh shares about his own very brief one-client turn as a rent boy and his one-time paying for sex seems really relevant and gives insights into Mr. Lucas paying for sex. It's hard to think positively of Lucas. He seems a bit loathsome, snobby, hypocrite, but maybe we all would be if we were as honest in our diaries and journals. Previous judgment of Greenlagh and his treatment of Lucas and the melding of the story with that of Lucas might have been too harsh. The epilogue is quite good and rescues the author in the subject bit. So I think this is a good book. It is a good work of history. What I would have liked is if, as I indicated in what I read, is if Greenlagh had let Mr. Lucas speak more often. You know, there are a lot of diary entries or excerpts from diary entries here, but in a book that's, you know, what is it, around 280 pages, and which, you know, says it's the diaries of Mr. Lucas. I kind of had hoped for more about Mr. Lucas's daily life, and I can only assume that a lot of excerpts weren't included because they didn't touch on anything that, you know, went beyond the relatively, you know, close confines of Mr. Lucas's life. So it's only when, you know, he knew something, like he was connected to a young man who was a part of the Craze gang in London. It's only when he knew somebody or had connection to somebody who was charged with, you know, committing homosexual acts which were illegal at the time that we get a lot from his diary. You do get a sense of the man, but I would have liked to have seen more of that and maybe a little bit less of, you know, Greenlagh kind of writing history in general and then fitting Lucas's diaries in. But again, it probably is because despite how many diaries Lucas kept, his life just really wasn't that interesting, which, you know, is a bit sad. The book is probably far more interesting than Mr. Lucas's life as a whole, and so I think the book succeeds. I think it's a good book, and if this is a subject you're interested in, I think this is a really good place to start, to get an impression of, you know, life in the 1960s in gay London. I think that it does a good job. It does what it says it's going to do on the tin, and therefore it's a good book. Anyway, if you've read this book, have thoughts about this book, please let me know in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you for watching.